Hello and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 169 of Who's the Bossk, and we will be discussing episode 6 of Star Wars Ahsoka, the excellent live-action Star Wars series on Disney+. And for that conversation, I have invited on the show first-time guest calling in from the East Coast, Caitlin Beards. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining me to chat about Star Wars for a little while. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Very glad to have you. I want to talk a little bit real quick about how I have been introduced to you. We don't really know each other. This is kind of our first time meeting, but we have a mutual friend, fashion designer Christine Geiger, who is a participant in the Her Universe fashion show at San Diego Comic-Con. I know she's done that a few times. I actually invited her to come on the show to talk about Ahsoka, but she said she didn't feel qualified. She doesn't really know the animation side of Star Wars. And she recommended you, also a participant in the Her Universe fashion show. So tell me a little bit about, we'll start by, I want to find out more about this because I had heard about this for years. It was one of those things where I was like, yeah, if I ever get the opportunity, I'll go. This year, my friend Sarah had an extra ticket for the fashion show. I went. It was a total blast. I really want to make it an appointment every year for me to go from now on, but I'm so curious about what goes on behind the scenes. So how did you get involved with this Her Universe fashion show, and what is that experience like for you?
So the Her Universe fashion show is an annual event at San Diego Comic-Con. This was its 9th year, hosted by Ashley Eckstein, who is the voice of Ahsoka Tano.
Yeah.
And this was my 3rd year submitting to the Her Universe fashion show. So designers actually have to submit a small portfolio with their concepts to the Her Universe people and to Hot Topic, and they narrow it down from I think there was 300 designers this year who submitted, and the top 25 got into the show this year. And since they were doing the Disney 100, it was celebrating Disney's 100 this year. So all the designs this year were from different Disney properties. So you had Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and just across the board, National Geographic. I think that was probably one of my favorite groups of designers. I've been a seamstress for over 20 years. And like I said, this was my 3rd time submitting, first time getting in. So it was really a brand new experience for me. We had about 2 months to create our custom designs. For me, my design was called the Westview Witch. It was based off of Wanda Maximoff from the Disney Plus series WandaVision, in particular. And it lit up. It had all the bells and whistles on it, like stuff I had never done before. And I had 2 months to figure out how to do it. So that was a little stressful, but no, it was just such a really great vibe with all the designers, because I feel like we had a weird, I don't want to say shared trauma of having to do everything within 2 months.
Right.
But we all chatted throughout the entire thing. We were in a little group together. We chatted. We had weekly meetings with the people from Her Universe. And overall, the experience was so positive. It really just reignited the spark of being a designer for me. And I felt like it was lacking a couple, I've done it for so long. I'm just oh my God, why am I still doing this type thing? And then this just reignited the spark where I have so many concepts and ideas that I want to do and not enough time or hours in the day to do them all.
You did an amazing job. I was so blown away by all the designs, really, but yours definitely stood out among them. And Christine's was awesome too. She did Prey, the Predator prequel. Prey.
Yeah, she was my table buddy backstage. Actually, we were sitting right next to each other because she went on right after me. So we got to hang out a lot during the show, which was really awesome.
Yeah, so both kind of outside the box for Disney, and then Ashley Eckstein's dressed with all the LED screens on the film strip. That thing was incredible too. So just so much cool stuff
Yeah,
to
her
look at.
dress was developed by Imagineers and
Right.
by one of the very talented designers that she always gets to work with. His name is Andrew, and he is phenomenal. But the technology of her dress was developed by Imagineers, and I believe the lead Imagineer who worked on it was also the one who reimagined and made the Hatbox Ghost animatronic actually work, which was really cool because, ironically, while I was working on my dress with my boyfriend, we were watching like behind the attractions on Disney Plus, and he popped up there, and I was like, "Oh, that's so amazing! He got the Hatbox Ghost to work. It was so cool." And then, literally a week later, he was standing backstage, like putting Ashley into her dress, and I'm like, little starstruck. I love Imagineers. So
So yeah, that's fantastic. I love Imagineers as well. But speaking of being starstruck, then what is your? Do you have much interaction with Ashley herself in that process?
So during the process, we were dealing a lot with directly with her team at her universe. Phenomenal people, amazing. Nicole, Rusty, everybody. You were all so incredible. So shout out to them.
Okay.
But when we got to San Diego, we walked into the ballroom. We were all seated in the front row seats. And in comes Ashley. She was with Mama Tano and Papa Tano and her
Mhm.
husband. And she came over and she just sat down and like took a nice deep breath. And she's like, okay, it's been a very stressful week because that was the week also that SAG-AFTRA went on strike.
Right.
So she was unsure if we were actually going to be able to do the show because of SAG-AFTRA. Luckily, they were able to give us their blessing and say you are not in violation of any strike rules or anything. So please do the show with our blessing, which was phenomenal and wonderful. And kudos to them and everything that they're doing. So Ashley really was just, she is such a sweet human being. I can't stress it enough that she is just so kind and welcoming. And even if it was like your first year ever being in the show, she treated you like you had been there since day one. She invited us to come up and like chat with her, so she got to know us and all these other things. And when I had my opportunity to go up to her, she's just like, "I remember you from my book signing in New York." And I'm just
Oh
sitting there
wow.
going, "How do you?" She's like, "I have a really good like memory with faces. I remember you." And I was like, "Don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but thank you." And no, she was just so supportive of every single person. Like she was on stage with us, like when we were walking, she was giving us feedback and encouragement. And during the show, even like she stood there, like when we came off stage and she couldn't hug anybody in that crazy dress of hers. So it was like a little fist bump when you came off the runway. And
Yeah.
honestly, bajillion out of 10, she is probably my favorite human being. Like seriously.
Yeah, she always seems so kind. I've been around her. I don't think I've ever really talked with her, but someday I'd love to have her on the show. Everybody I know who knows her is absolutely in love with her. So she seems like a great person.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did want to remind folks out there, if you're listening or watching, we are live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. So if you do want to comment in the chat or whatever, I'll be happy to address any questions or concerns you may have. But we do have a little bit of business to take care of, Caitlin, because this is your first time on the show. You have to do something called the 5 Star Wars questions. Are you ready for this?
Okay, I am prepared. Let's do
Okay.
it.
Number 1 of the 5 Star Wars questions. What is your earliest Star Wars memory?
My earliest Star Wars memory is when I was in elementary school, and my dad had VHS copies of the original trilogy that he had recorded off of television. So they had like commercial breaks and stuff in there. But I remember that was when I first originally watched Star Wars, and I was just completely smitten with it after that. But apparently, my sister had told me a story. She's like, when you were like really little, you were super into the Ewoks. And I'm like, I do not remember this. But apparently, Ewoks were like little me's jam, and I was all here for it. But yeah, I remember watching the first 3 trilogy the original trilogy films with
Yeah.
my dad on really crappy recorded VHS tapes.
And pretty much stuck right away. You were a fan at that point,
Yeah.
from that point on. Great. So number 2, then, as an adult currently, what would you call your favorite Star Wars movie? Or you can pick a TV show if you like, and why?
Star Wars Rebels.
Awesome.
Rebels is definitely my all-time favorite Star Wars media I think they've ever done. And the reason for that is because as I went through college, like I still really enjoyed Star Wars, but I like super hardcore into Star Wars during college. No, I kind of fell out of the fandom. Rebels is what brought me back into the fandom. Rebels is what reintroduced me to like the world of Star Wars as an adult.
Yeah.
And I think it's just the overarching story. Like the story in Rebels is incredible. They bring back so many callbacks to the Clone Wars, and just the Ghost family in general is probably, without a doubt, some of the best Star Wars storytelling, in my opinion. Anyway.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with Rebels, actually kind of bringing me back into the fold because I had fallen away from Star Wars for a little while, and then I heard, I think it's like halfway through season one of Rebels, and I was hearing really good things, and my girlfriend, now wife, at the time we started watching it. I think we caught up to where they were, and from that point on, we were really into it, and it's been like, what is it now, 8 years or more? When did that show start? 2013, 2014, somewhere around there.
Something like that. Yeah.
But yeah, really great show, and definitely like the beginning of this new era, the Disney era of Star Wars, I guess, if you want to call it. So if you haven't seen Rebels, definitely go out and watch that. And if you haven't seen it, you're probably very confused about Ahsoka, but we'll get into that in a little while. Number 3 of the 5 Star Wars questions: who is your favorite Star Wars character and why?
So I might be a little biased, but I have 2 Star Wars characters that are like top tier for me. One is Ahsoka Tano, and the other is Kanan Jarrus.
Okay.
Kanan's character development is probably some of the most refined storytelling for a character in Star Wars for me. And his relationship with Hera, of all the characters, his relationship with Hera is by far one of the most healthiest relationships in a Star Wars, minus, what happens to him. But, one of the
Right.
healthiest relationships you'll find in the Star Wars universe. And like my boyfriend and I, like we cosplay as Kanan and Hera. We
Nice.
Disney bounded as Kanan and Hera. So I have a very deep connection to the 2 of them, but mainly Kanan, because his story was just so well done. And Freddie Prinze Jr. did an amazing job playing him. And yeah, and with Ahsoka, I mean, Ahsoka has been the driving force behind why I really love Star Wars now as an adult. When I went back and I watched Clone Wars again, I remember like flashbacks to seeing it on TV when it was originally airing. And the arc that made me just fall in love with Ahsoka was Mortis. I don't know why the Mortis arc with her was just so like solidifying for my love of this character, but the whole of that like very small little part of Clone Wars just made me like adore her even more.
Great. Yeah, and obviously we're going to talk about Ahsoka a bunch more later on, but when Kanan got that little shout out last week, what was your reaction to that?
My heart, I couldn't handle it. Every time I see Jason, I'm just like, I really just a tiny peek at Kanan, please, just a little Force Ghost, maybe. No, okay, fine. But no, every time because I mean, if you saw it, like Hera has a picture of him on the dash of the Ghost, and like every time I see just little call outs to Kanan, I'm just like, my heart, I can't handle this.
All right, number 4. If you happen to live in the fictional Star Wars universe, where do you think you would fit in? What faction would you belong to? And the examples I always list are the Jedi Order, the Sith, the Rebel Alliance, the Empire, the Bounty Hunters, the scum and villainy hanging out in the cantina, or anything else you can come up with. What do you think, Caitlin? Where would you fit in the Star Wars universe?
That is a very difficult question because I feel like it could expand across anything. Like I almost sit here being like, I have a lot of like, I love the Jedi because I love like the lore of the Jedi and the history of the Jedi, but at the same time, I love how the Sith are just like the more awesome version of the Jedi. I mean, like in my charity groups, I play both. I play a Jedi and I play a Sith. So it's like I have 2 sides, 1 force type situation here. Honestly, I think it would have to be the Jedi.
Okay.
It may sound, like the easy way out, but the Jedi, I mean, moving things with your mind, and just
Right.
like I love the richness of the culture of the Jedi, and I love how just while it's a very strict culture, it's still like really interesting, and there's so many layers to it, especially things with like the New Republic, and you're learning more about like the ancient ways of the Jedi. I mean, it's just so much. So I would have to say Jedi.
Okay. And yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying about the Sith being like slightly more awesome version of the Jedi because
Better color schemes.
have you ever played Knights of the Old Republic video game?
Very little bit, yeah.
Okay. When that game came out, I guess it's 20 years ago now. I went dark side because you can go either way in that
Mm.
game. And the powers are so awesome. Like I always talk about this power that you get in that game called Destroy Droid, where anytime one of the enemies is a droid, you just like tap that button and the thing just explodes. That was my favorite power, Destroy Droid. But I recently like rebought that game because it came like the super special edition of it came
Mm.
out. So I've started playing through it again, and I was telling my wife like I haven't done the good path before, so I have to like try to remind myself to make all my answers like really nice
I
and go
have to be
down
a nice
the
person right now.
yeah, I have to be the light side this time, and I know it's not going to be as exciting, but it'll probably be. I guess it'll be more rewarding in the end. I don't know.
Supposedly,
We'll
depending
find
on your personality. I mean, it could go
exactly.
either way.
Exactly. Impression or possession. This is number five, fifth and
Okay.
final of the 5 Star Wars questions. This is where I ask my guest to either do a Star Wars impression or simply opt out and tell me about a favorite Star Wars possession they may own. What do you think, Caitlin? Which one would you like to do?
I will go with favorite Star Wars possession,
Okay, it's a
uh,
popular choice.
which I grabbed before I came in here. So this is my dark saber that I have.
Awesome. Is
It's
that the
the
Hasbro
Hasbro.
one?
Yeah, this is the
Nice.
Hasbro one. I pre-ordered it the minute that it went live, and it is definitely it's very much dead right now. Um, but it is my favorite Star Wars possession that I have. The dark saber is probably one of my favorite lightsabers in universe.
Yeah.
So this thing has some heft to it, which is really nice. But yeah, this right here, my favorite thing that I have.
Fantastic. Yeah, I have that too somewhere behind me in the big pile of stuff.
And then
Um,
the one other little one is this one
sure.
here. It's my little Morai.
Right. Convoy. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
which I love him so much. From a Star Wars celebration, a friend of mine got him for me, which I was like, yay!
So cool. All right, that's the end of the 5 Star Wars questions, and that brings us to Star Wars headlines for this week. Not a lot of news coming out of a galaxy far, far away, but we did get a couple new comic books coming out today. The beginning of this new miniseries, Star Wars Dark Droids D Squad, which is a spinoff of the main Dark Droids crossover event miniseries, which I read and reviewed on laughingplace.com. There's also Bounty Hunters number 38, which I just finished reading, have not written my review yet. Both are good. Recommend both. Caitlin, are you into the comics at all?
I actually, the last comic I read of Star Wars was The Dark Citadel, or The Screaming Citadel, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the last one I read, which I was absolutely obsessed with. I loved that.
Okay.
That's my last comic I read.
Okay. So that was probably like what, 5 years ago or
Yeah.
so. Yeah, but there's
My
been a
favorite
lot of
comics are
good stuff.
fantastic, so I'm just like, I really should read more comics.
Yeah, I know. It's just I've said this many times on the show, but they were really churning them out for a long time. There were weeks where there were, I think the most ever was like 7 different comics came out in the same day. Right now it's like two a week on average, so that's better. Easier to keep up with, but it's still a lot if you're not like really on top of it. So it can get away from you.
Yeah.
We also got part 1 of the Ahsoka soundtrack is now available to stream. The music is written by Kevin Kiner, of course, who did the Clone Wars and Rebels, and now he's doing Ahsoka. And you can go and stream this wherever you get your. I think it's on Spotify, other sources. Have you listened to any of this music?
Yes, and I'm obsessed. I love
Yeah,
orchestral music in general from series and whatnot, and I I mean, it's gorgeous. His work is always incredible with everything that he's done. I love all the little callbacks to like different parts of different series that he's done, or like
yeah,
character themes that will slowly come in. I mean, it's beautiful. And if you haven't downloaded or listened to it on your streaming, go do it because it's amazing.
yeah. Agreed. Great composer, great guy. He's been on this podcast. It was so cool to talk to him. So go and listen to Ahsoka soundtrack part 1, available wherever you stream your music. Lastly, we've been getting these new character posters every week after the new episodes of Ahsoka. And this week, the characters were young Ahsoka from last week's episode, Anakin Skywalker, of course, and Captain Rex. So this is the week for all the big Clone Wars fans was really a big payoff for them. Let's see. That's going to bring us to our main topic for this week, and I'm so excited to talk about this episode. I have pages of notes, like more questions and stuff I want to bring up than any episode previously of this series. So very excited. But I want to start by asking you, Caitlin. Well, you already kind of talked about this. Your history with Ahsoka as a character. You mentioned her as one of your favorite characters. Is there anything else that you want to say about the character of Ahsoka, though, before we talk about the series?
For Ahsoka as a character, I think when we had her in the last season of Clone Wars, I think was the moment where I was sitting here going, "Oh my god, like this character is incredible." Um and I was just like completely like I refell in love with her with that especially like her fight with Maul was just like sold me. But it was ironically her in Rebels too. That was me sitting here going, this character, she has so many layers to her. And we're getting to see more of that within this series because there's just so much to her that Filoni and his whole team are unpacking, and you keep seeing, and after last week's episode, my god, it's like her character is like been reborn into like what she originally was and who she originally was, which I'm just like,
Yeah.
okay.
Right. So you obviously loved her in the animation, but now that she's been in the live action, she popped up in The Mandalorian, really that whole episode in season 2 of The Mandalorian, where we got to see Ahsoka in live action for the first time, played by Rosario Dawson. And then she was in one episode of the Book of Boba Fett, and now she's got her own series. What have you thought of all that content up until this point, not including this week's episode?
So up until here, like when she showed up in the first like 5 seconds of the episode in season 2, I was sold. Like she was Rosario's portrayal of Ahsoka is phenomenal. I really appreciate the fact that she did her homework. She picks up on the little mannerisms or the inflections of the voice or all these other little things where it brought to life that Ashley brought to the screen when she was playing her in the animated version, and her own kind of spin on her as well as the more adult version of Ahsoka. And I really think that she's just kind of killing it. I'm not gonna lie, she's doing a really great job. I still think of all the live action iteration we've had of her, the Jedi episode of The Mandalorian is still probably one of my favorite moments with her because, I mean, an iconic fandom character being finally portrayed, which even Dave Filoni, he was like, I was really worried of putting her in, so I held off until season 2 because I was really worried about it, but knocked it out of the park. And I love how she had like this lone swordsman, very like Japanese style like vibe to her.
Right.
I mean, just the whole fight between her and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name. The magistrate in
Morgan Elsbeth.
thank you. Um, Fantastic. Like
Yeah.
it's just so Kurosawa, and you can see the influences of Japanese cinema in that one little bit. So I'm just like, I'm sold.
Yeah, totally agreed. Definitely with you on all that. And that brings us to last night, 6 p.m. my time, 9 p.m. your time. We got episode 6 of Ahsoka. The title is far away. Of course, we know that is a reference to the very first text that we see on screen in all the theatrical Star Wars movies. And it's also spoken by Hu Yang as he's telling Ahsoka a story of the history of the galaxy. So Dave Filoni got to sneak in a tribute to his mentor George Lucas there, which I thought was very touching. But what were your initial thoughts on episode 6 coming out of the debut last night?
Whew, okay. um, I knew in this episode we were probably going to see Thrawn. I
Yeah.
knew he was going to make his grand appearance because it's Thrawn and he needs an entrance. I was really concerned, ironically, that oh my god, they're gonna end this episode before we see Ezra. It's gonna happen. They're gonna wait until the next episode, and like just overall, like it was very lots of questions. I have so many questions.
Yeah.
Like Oh, like it was great. It was just
It
great.
was great. I called it my favorite so far. I'll stick by that, having rewatched it again. Um, I think, you know, depending on what your era of Star Wars is, whichever era you grew up on initially, you're probably going to have different favorite episodes of this show because there are prequel people, and I'm not one of them. I was an adult by the time the prequels came out. It took me a long time to warm up to them.
Mhm.
So Anakin, as played by Hayden Christensen, not really my favorite. So I get that people were freaking out about that episode last week. I thought it was really good, but Thrawn was my first favorite Star Wars character. I was 11 years old when Heir to the Empire, the novel, came out. And I was like, oh, this guy Thrawn, he's an amazing villain. I never thought in a million years we'd ever get to see him in live action. So that alone made this episode uh, everything I wanted it to be and more. And just his whole introduction, the shot of the Star Destroyer, the Chimera, coming up over that Night Sister castle. Boy, that was so cool. One of my favorite shots in any recent Star Wars stuff. But I was just so jazzed.
Yeah.
And like you, I I expected to get Thrawn. I didn't expect to get Ezra.
Mhm.
So that was kind of an added bonus as well. But just a really, really great episode all around.
Yeah, it was
Um,
beautifully shot too. Like some of the shots
yeah,
they had in there, like you mentioned with the Star Destroyer, like
yeah.
that gave me goosebumps. Like I was sitting there going, "Oh, it's happening. Okay, okay. He needs an
Absolutely.
entrance, so okay, I got you." But
Yeah.
whew,
And then my one of my bosses was complaining about the little crab creatures at the end, saying they were too cutesy. But I mean, it just felt so Star Wars to me. Like, yeah, I mean, I grew up on the Ewoks. These are basically like
little
Ewoks but
crabby bucks.
turtles. Yeah, right. I don't know. What did you think of those guys?
I thought they were very sharply dressed. I thought they were adorable, and
Yeah,
I guess like it's in like the Star Wars repertoire that you need like your crazy bounty hunters out there and your
yeah.
mercenaries, and then you need like the one lone race of creatures who are super cute and are just like we're here to exist because this is our planet. But
Right.
they were so cute, and I thought that like I said, very sharply dressed. Like they had their stuff together. I mean, like I don't know who was their tailor, but sign me up. I love it. But no, it was definitely like I just like how they blended in with the environment around them too,
Yeah.
how they were all the little rocks. And then another thing I loved was Sabine's mount she had that they gave her.
Right, right,
I'm a
right.
sucker for, a good doggo in the Star Wars universe.
Yes.
So, and especially like the whole scene where she's yelling at him like, "You left me." And like poor thing was like walking off and she's like, "Never mind, fine, you can come." And I'm just like, that those little like character moments because she would like thinking back to her original character in Rebels, I'm like, she would. Like that would be a conversation that would have happened.
That was kind of my other initial thought coming out of this episode was I really wanted a toy because I'm such an action figure person. I want a toy of the dog creature, which is called a howler,
Yeah.
and I really want toys of the all the like busted up stormtrooper armor because
Yes.
as soon as they started panning across those stormtroopers, I was like, oh my god, what's happened to these guys? Uh, This is actually a good segue to kind of skip ahead to one of my questions.
Mhm.
What do you think has happened to Thrawn and his army, or whatever, the battalion of stormtroopers aboard his Star Destroyer, since they got whisked away by these Purrgil space whales to this other galaxy? And now we see them, I think it's 10 years later or so in the timeline, and they have been through something. Like, there's a line that Thrawn has where he says, "Oh, our troops have dwindled or something,
Yeah.
or our fleet." I don't remember what the word he actually uses, but dwindled was definitely in there. So
Mhm.
I'm like wondering, are they starving, or is Ezra taking a bunch of them out? I don't. Do you have a theory about like what has caused this damage to Thrawn's troops?
So my theory is that whoever was left on the ship and made the jump with the Purgle, I'm going to assume that a bunch of them probably didn't make it through the jump,
Yeah.
depending on where they were on the ship. And those who did survive, like, they did not have supplies on that ship for 10 years to outfit, like, all of these troopers.
Right.
And between the harsh environment and, probably Ezra, taking a few out on his way out type
Yeah.
situation, I was probably going to assume that, yeah, they lost a lot of people. Like, it was kind of like an Oregon Trail situation. They lost them to dysentery and all these other things on the way across the galaxy type situation. Because it probably, I mean, obviously, you get there relatively quickly through the way of the Purgle here,
Yeah.
but 10 years on a remote planet with a lot of other things that don't want them there, most likely, they probably just succumbed. And that's why I'm kind of sitting here being like, I have so many theories.
Right. Yeah. So I definitely want toys of the Howlers, the Troopers, this new character, Captain Enoch,
Yeah.
which is let's see, I have it down here somewhere. Captain Enoch. Oh, he's played by Wes Chatham from the Hunger Games, and
Oh.
he's got this gold mask. It again, a very Asian
Mhm.
influence here, and I noticed on a lot of the armor. I had to look up what this art process is called. You've probably
Oh,
seen this
it's
where
uh Kintsugi.
kintsugi, yeah, where they if a piece of pottery breaks or something, they repair it by using like little gold stitches or gold. I don't even know what you would call it, but it looks super cool, and I can't wait to get toys of that. But I also, the little crab people are called the Noti Noti. So many toyetic ideas coming out of this, and the witches. Oh yeah, we got to
Yeah.
talk about the witches. So we've seen the Night Sisters of Dathomir. They were introduced in a novel called The Courtship of Princess Leia back in the Legends era, Legends
94,
timeline.
I think.
Yeah, and then they were obviously in the Clone Wars animated series, and then we've got them in the Jedi Fallen Order video games, and now in live action. So cool to see them. One of them, okay, so there's three actresses. They're all known actresses. The first one that really excited me was Claudia Black from Farscape, which is another of my. Have you ever watched Farscape?
I've seen a bit of Farscape, yeah.
Yeah, so
Really?
she's like the female lead of Farscape, is one of the Night Sisters. Let's see. Gerald Prescott Gallion, she was in The Walking Dead. She's one of the others. And then Jane Edwina Seymour is from Star Trek Picard. She's the Borg queen on that. So they got like uh, a bunch of different sci-fi genre actresses to come in and play these Night Sisters. I just thought that was so cool to get to
Yeah.
see these. And we kind of learned a little bit more about this planet Peridia and how it was the ancestral home of the witches. And I don't know, what did you think of this location and the witches themselves?
So I love the Night Sisters. They are probably like some of my like faves of the
Yeah.
Clone Wars. And then especially in Fallen Order, I'm a big fan of Fallen Order.
Oh,
So
great.
loved Marin, loved
Yeah.
all of that. Um, to tie this in back to the thing with Thrawn's armor, this also ties into the other like thought process I had about the whole theory of what happened to his troops. And what I think is that they crash, they end up in this place, they run into, the owners of the planet, basically the ones
Right.
who are like the hierarchy here. And Thrawn, being the smooth talker that he is, he makes the deal and he strikes a deal being like, let me help you. I can do this. You help me help you type situation. And I find it interesting that I think that the Night Sisters or Night Mothers, they're actually Night Mothers, not Night Sisters.
Okay.
Night Mothers are because I viewed, since there were three of them, they had like this kind of fates kind of situation, kind of like from Greek um culture and things like that, which I
Hmm.
thought was really kind of cool.
Yeah.
I was like seeing the fates like happen here in front of me, which I thought was really awesome. But I think that he made a deal with them, and using their magic actually probably reanimated some of his troopers. So I
Oh,
think that that might have some tie to them, especially being like as obedient, and like when he came out, they were chanting his name,
right.
and I think that might have had to do with like the magic they might have used to revive these fallen troopers for him to give him the scale army that he did have, because I'm going to assume he did not have a lot of those people survive.
Yeah.
But to have them be reanimated, which also ties into how I viewed like how they did the armor, like the aesthetic of using like that Japanese style with the red accents.
Mm-hmm.
But it also could have been because that red is also part of the Night Mother and Night Sisters like motif for things that have died in their
Right.
culture. So I think having that as an accent along a lot of the armor really just kind of was like, I think some of these guys are reanimated, and I think the Night Mothers had something to do with it.
I think you might be right. I think that's a great theory, and it also ties into with one of my other questions, which is going to be, what is happening with all these like casket or coffin looking things that they're loading onto the Star Destroyer from the catacombs of the castle there. And
Mhm.
yeah, we've seen in the cartoons and the video games that the Night Sisters have this power to basically create zombies. Like this is the Star Wars equivalent of zombies. So is Thrawn building a zombie army?
I'm here for it. Listen, if one of them is from The Walking Dead, it just totally tracks. So, um, but
Comment we got in the chat here. Sergeant Strawberry says zombie stormtrooper cosplays would be sick. Yeah,
oh yeah,
let's
totally.
get some of that going in the 501st. I wanted to mention the creative team for this episode. This episode, Far, Far Away, was directed by Jennifer Getzinger, who did a bunch of episodes of Mad Men, one of the best TV shows ever. So great to see her work here. Written, all these episodes are written by Dave Filoni. The director of photography this week was Eric Steelberg, who we've seen a couple times before. He did Ghostbusters Afterlife. And then the editor was James D. Wilcox from the movie 13 Lives. Let's talk about Thrawn himself. So, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up reading him in the novels. Then we got Lars Mikkelsen was the voice actor who played him in Star Wars Rebels. And I thought it actually, on Rebels, it took me a few episodes to adjust, because you always hear a character in your head,
right.
and then you hear somebody interpreting that character in audio form, and it takes you a little while to warm up to him. But then now I think of him as Thrawn. So did you get to are you a Celebration person? Did you go to Celebration in London this
I
year?
really wish I did. I watched all the panels though. So.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just being there in that room and back in April when they announced that Lars Mikkelsen would be back to play him in live action, it was just an amazing moment. And I just got chills again this week, last night, seeing him. You first see him from behind. He comes out through the big battalion of stormtroopers. But I guess I want to ask you, what do you think of Lars Mikkelsen as Thrawn, both in the animation and now in live action?
So, the animated version of Thrawn was really my first introduction to the character. I never had the opportunity to read the books. Really want to. They are literally sitting in a pile, and I've just never gotten the chance to read them. But I think he just nailed everything. He had such a presence about him, and I know from my understanding of Thrawn in Rebels that this man carries a presence, and his cool nature of like how he speaks and how he acts and everything. He's like a master tactician. Like he
Yeah.
is the reason that like you should be worried, and that's why they are so concerned that he's coming back, and everybody's like, nah, he's fine, he's gone, and but with his portrayal of him in live action, I mean, the minute he opened his mouth, I'm just like, oh my god, it's happened. Oh gosh, it's come to life, drawing off the page. He's there, and it was incredible. I found originally with his voice, like the voice is intimidating, and with his
Right.
portrayal of him in Rebels, I was sitting there going, he's an animated character. He's standing there talking, and I'm terrified of this man. So to see him actually do it in real life, and that, like I said, his entrance was just
Yeah.
chef's kiss. I mean, that gorgeous back shot, the shot, panning shot as he's walking, you see all the troopers like, and then they're chanting his name, and I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, like beautifully shot. Like
Yeah.
kudos to the cinematographer because they really nailed just those great shots of him coming out. And yeah, like especially when he ran into Sabine again, he's like, somebody, a familiar face, and she's just like, rude. So
Yeah, totally agreed. The only little like mental note I made in the moment was that Thrawn had a pot belly, I guess is the best way to say it. Which I don't, I don't picture the character like that, but also at the same time, it made me feel a little bit better about the possibility of eventually maybe cosplaying him. So it's like it's kind of a trade-off. And I'm totally cool with him being a slightly different shape than I had pictured, if it means that Lars Mikkelsen gets to play him, because he is so cool and imposing and just perfect in that role. And maybe it has something to do with the diet that's available to them on this planet. Who knows?
I mean, you can't work out every day when you're
Yeah,
stranded on a planet a bajillion miles from home. So I mean, like, more power to him for looking that good. So
exactly. Let's talk about kind of the other side of that coin is Ezra Bridger. Now we saw this actor Iman Esfandi play Ezra earlier in the season in a hologram, kind of recreating what we saw in the animation. But this is our first time really getting to see him in a new scene. Ezra's grown the beard out. He's got a little bit of a different attitude. What do you think of this actor? Now you're a big Rebels fan, so I'm very curious. What do you think of this new actor, Iman Esfandi, as Ezra Bridger?
I think he did a really great job. Ezra is just such a dear character to me in general, and I was really kind of not concerned, but seeing anything animated brought to live action, you're always going to sit there being like, I don't know, is this going to work? Is this going to work? Um, I love the fact, and it's such a small detail, and I don't know if this was intended by the dressers and the makeup department, but the way that they had Ezra portrayed with his beard and his long hair, he is the spitting image of his dad. Which, like, if you put the animated picture of his
Right.
father next to him, they look. It's such like a little detail, but a little detail that like sparks so much joy in me as the Rebels fan that I know and am and love. However, and I'm just going to say this: this is just a small thing for me, a small nitpick, and I know a couple of other people have said it, so take this as a grain of salt. The color scheme with the beard and the hair was giving me very Prince of Egypt, Prince of like
Okay.
Moses vibes. Let my snail people go type situation. Um, no fault of anybody's, but it was just like a little bit, just a little bit.
Okay.
But overall, I think he did a great job. I think with his reunion with Sabine, I was almost expecting like a little bit more emotion. I think that it almost felt like a little bit flat because Ezra already was sitting there going, "They're gonna come find me, like eventually, 10 years later, but they're gonna
Right.
come get me. It's fine. It's like being left behind at soccer practice. They're coming. It's fine."
Yeah.
But I think that the just I feel like there could have been just a little bit more emotion, especially with how much Sabine wanted to find Ezra.
Right.
I feel like it was almost lacking a little bit in the emotion
Hmm.
department. I wasn't expecting, tears and crying and oh my god, and but I wasn't expecting anything like that. But at
Right.
the same time, I was just. But then again, flip the coin a bit. The sassy remarks from both Ezra and Sabine to each other is very space sibling of them, and that's probably how they would be chatting with each other at this
Yeah.
point. It was, but it was still good. Like I still sat there and I'm like, if you're not going to get emotional, then I am. So
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be doing all right. He definitely like settled into his life there with the crab people. But there's obviously this other shoe left to drop where Ezra is definitely going to find out what Sabine, like that Sabine kind of betrayed the entire galaxy to come and rescue him. What do you think the fallout from that
it's
is
not
going
going
to
to be
be?
good. It's not going to be good. Because I mean, the whole point of Ezra doing what he did was to get Thrawn away from everybody and to save them. And she just gave him a get out of jail free card situation. And so I don't think he's gonna take it very well.
Right.
I think there's a lot happening with that because he's like, I'm so excited to go home. And she's just kind of sitting there going, yeah, about that. Mm. So I really want to see how it plays out because I think it needs to have a small blow up. Like if it goes without any consequence, then I think that's just a disservice to like the characters and the sacrifice Ezra made for umpteen years being thrown across to the other side of the galaxy type situation.
Right.
So I think there really needs to be a repercussion for Sabine's action. She needs to understand, like that Mandalorian spirit of hers needs to realize there's repercussions to your actions, my dear
Yeah.
child. So
Well, not only did she like betray the galaxy, but she also, my wife pointed out that she also undid everything that Ezra did,
yeah,
because the reason that happened at the end of Rebels is because he wants to get rid of Thrawn, basically, and he's willing to sacrifice himself to do that. So if Thrawn gets to go back to the main galaxy, it's basically like negating Ezra's the whole decade that he spent in
yeah.
exile over
And that's
there.
just, I can see him getting really upset about it because he's like, "What? You're a fool. Like you could have just left me here. It would have been fine. I would
Yeah,
have found a way. Like life finds a way, and he would have found it." But I mean,
absolutely.
also it was echoing to the like. There was a quote that he kept saying, like you. I forget on the tip of my tongue. I was watching. I saw this earlier, but he made Sabine promise basically like
Yeah,
we'll figure this out, we'll get through this, you're gonna find me, it's gonna, and she did what she said she would do and followed through with what she said she would do, but at the same time, at what cost? I mean, she betrayed Ahsoka in the way by going with them to begin with,
right.
giving them back the map, which was very Treasure Planet of them, by the way.
Yeah.
Giving them back the map was another huge betrayal there. And now that she's just like, are you gonna just like I, I just wanted to stand there and shake her, being like, it's not worth it.
Mhm.
I mean, it is, but it's not.
Right, right. Sergeant Strawberry said that they like that the governor was Clancy Brown and Hu Yang is David Tennant. Yeah, excellent. Both great character actors and both reprising their roles from
Yeah,
the animation. So if you like them here, go check them out in Clone Wars and Rebels. Of course, I've got a bunch of other little details I just want to run through.
yeah, go for it.
I love the new look of hyperspace when
Yeah.
both the whales and the villains are going through hyperspace. We've got those new like rainbow colors, but I thought it was just the whales at first, and then they
Hmm.
cut to the villain ship, and they also saw that. But do you think that was just because they're traveling so far to this other galaxy that it looked a little different?
Actually, I would probably bet that that would probably be the case because they are traveling so much further than a regular hyperspace jump.
Yeah,
So I think that's their way of distinguishing that we're going much further than we've ever gone. Um, but what was funny is that when Ahsoka in the previous episode got into the Purgle's mouth and they took off into
yeah,
hyperspace, I made a joke when I was talking about this with my boyfriend. I made a joke being like, could you imagine that, if they're in hyperspace and the scene from The Mandalorian where Grogu sees the silhouette of the Purgle, and
yeah.
the whole reason he reacted was because it's like, there goes Ahsoka, Dad. So it's like we're just layering it up, people.
Right.
It makes sense. It's just all layers.
Yeah, could be.
Everything's connected.
When they got to the planet Peridia, we got some great production design in the form of the kind of whale graveyard outside of the orbit of the planet, and then on the surface of the planet, these really creepy looking statues of the Night Sisters. What did you think? Did you have any thoughts about that stuff?
So when they first arrived and you see these beautiful rings, like it looks like Saturn, and you see the
Yeah,
beautiful rings, I'm like, oh, it's gorgeous. Look, they're actually just in our galaxy, people. Spoiler, it's Saturn. And then when they zoom in and they show that the rings are made up of all the dead Purgle bones and like carcass and everything, I'm just like, I rescind my statement. Um, but no, I thought that was such an interesting and unique way to do these rings around the planet. And just like when they brought like the camera down and they were like zooming, like going through, following the ship through, and you
yeah,
saw all the bone, like it was such a cool detail. I eat that stuff up. I just love that kind of detail in any like television or film where it's such like they were like, "Oh, it's very subtle," and then it's gonna, like, punch you
yeah.
kind of in the face, but really cool. And as for all those, like, gorgeous statues, I was getting of I got a lot of, like, Lord of the Rings vibes,
Right.
actually. I got, like, a Minas Tirith kind of thing,
Right.
like, where the Night Mothers were on top of the castle, and I'm sitting here being like, "I'm getting, like, Minas Tirith." I'm s very but I thought it was really interesting because, in a way, by, like, figuring out, like, Night Sister Dathomir lore, I feel like it was almost like they retconned a lot of stuff by saying, "This is the origin of the
Hmm.
Night Sisters." I was like, "I thought that was a fallen Jedi that was banished to Dathomir and started a whole, like, culture, and now I am confused." So, I find that really that's another, like, big question I have. I'm like, "Did we just, like, change
Hmm.
the Night Sister lore? I'm very confused here." So
Yeah, it's a good question. And speaking of lore and history, that's a great segue to talk about the next big question I have. We learned quite a bit more. So this is the big question I've been having the whole series actually is why is Balin Skull doing what he's doing? What are his motivations? And we actually got a big like info dump about that this week where he's talking about not really missing the Jedi Order, but missing, the idea of the Jedi
mm,
and what is his actual goal in helping Morgan Elsbeth seek out Thrawn and everything. And he's talking about this cycle, how the Jedi and the Empire or whatever, or they just keep rising and falling in different forms. And then he's talking about uh, searching for a beginning or seeking out a beginning so he can put an end to the cycle. And then later on in the episode, there when Balin and Shin Hati are out hunting for Sabine and Ezra, Balin says something like, "Oh, can you feel this presence that's on this planet? It might be the reason why the Night Sisters left because there was a power here that's even greater than they are." What is your interpretation of all this? Because I feel like we now have a quite a few more clues as to what he actually wants and how he's going to go about getting it.
I think and this is just a real shot in the dark here,
Yeah.
so, but for a power greater to stop a loop from happening actually brings me back to the thought of Mortis
Mm,
with the father, the daughter, and the son. And for them, they are like the infinite loop of the Force. And a power greater than the Night Sisters as a whole would be a source within the Force itself. Because technically speaking, the magic that the Night Sisters use is a form of the Force.
right.
And another thought process I had was they could be looking for um like the tomb of the original Night Sister, like the founding mother of the Night Sister clan, which it was, I think, Alia, I believe her name was, who was a dark Jedi and she fell and then was banished to Dathomir because Dathomir at the time and during that particular point in the Republic was kind of like the Australia of the Jedi Order. It was a prison. So they just kind of sent everybody there. And then she created her whole culture and her matriarchy and taught her daughters all the different techniques of managing the Force without being one with the Force like a Jedi, and more so leaning towards the dark. So I thought that maybe it could be her core center and her core, like maybe her tomb is there
Hmm,
that they're going to be seeking out. But the more I think about it, the more it's me sitting here going, it could be a tie to Mortis
yeah.
because or even like a way back to the world between worlds. I mean, not, we've already seen it once, so don't, beat a dead horse
Right.
here. But it could definitely be. Those are my three like top theories right now. Is either
Okay.
it's Alia's tomb, a way to Mortis, or the world between worlds to fix what is broken.
Yeah. No, I think those are great theories. I do always wonder if the father and the son and the daughter, if the Mortis gods are a little too out there for
Mm,
like mainstream Star Wars audiences, but
yeah,
I guess they've brought in stuff that's weird before, and I think the Night Sisters are up there too. So if we're getting into it, we might as well get into it.
I'm here
Um,
for it in live action. Like I have friends who were watching Star Wars who have never watched Clone Wars or Rebels, and they're just like, I have no idea what's happening. I'm like, it's gonna be okay. Let's sit
I
down. Let's have
know.
some tea. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I really like the Force Awakens is the beginner's intro to Star Wars, and this is like the expert level You really got to know your
It's
stuff.
getting really deep. This is a deep cut.
So as a costume designer and somebody who's worked in that field or dabbled in that field in whatever way you have, I have a question for you about Thrawn's, a couple things actually, because in addition to the stormtroopers getting all kind of beat up armor, we see that Thrawn has some uh scuffs and marks on his uniform. I was wondering what your interpretation was of that. And then I also wanted to ask you, do you think, like, behind the scenes, based on whatever expertise you may have, do you think they are actually putting blue makeup on Lars Mikkelson's face, or are they just like tinting his face blue in post-production? I don't know. What do you think?
So for the makeup question, they're definitely painting him blue.
Okay.
There's definitely like a texture to his skin. They're probably amplifying it maybe a little in post. But I know for a fact that with a lot of Star Wars, they'd like to go practical with their makeup. Rosario Dawson is painted orange. She sits in the chair and gets painted
Yeah.
orange. Um, I would not want to be the makeup artist who has to paint the man blue and then put him in white. That would give me a little bit of a heart attack. So shout out to the makeup artists and the costume design people who
Yeah.
are putting this man in a white coat after painting him blue.
Right.
Because yikes. Painting myself orange for Ahsoka was always like a small heart attack inducing statement. So like
Mhm.
thinking about that just gives me like heart palpitations. Um, as for his uniform, like, I mean, the man's been shipwrecked on a planet for 10 years.
Right.
And so the fact that he still looked as pristine as he did
Yeah.
was very surprising. Like, even like with the ship crash, I mean, I'm not going to expect he goes to his room and all of his stuff is like perfect and
Right.
pristine. But I think it's a really nice touch to his outfits to show that even though he is this character of intimidation and to be feared, there's still the small imperfections of what's happened to him, which
Yeah.
he's probably really annoyed about. Like, just to be real here, he's probably really annoyed that he can't look as clean and pristine as he should.
Even though he came out on the other side better than like 95% of his troops and
He
the
shouldn't
Star
complain.
Destroyer, which is like fallen apart, and they've clearly repaired parts of it. I really
Like
like that
he
detail.
should have no reason to complain. He came out really well after that, considering everybody else.
Exactly. The other thing that I thought was funny in this episode was we got another like force fake out from Sabine, which she couldn't move the cup, and then like later on she's fighting was it Shinhati, I
Mhm.
guess, and she's about to use the force, and then she like goes to the wrist rocket, and then now in this episode she's trying to open the door with the force, and everything starts rumbling, and it's the Star Destroyer coming over. So I don't know. This has been a subject of debate on this podcast, but
Mm.
do you think do you think that we'll see Sabine use the force for that kind of telekinesis at some point later on, or is she going to come into her own in a different way?
I really hope she comes into her own in a different way.
Me too.
Um, it's a difficult like I've had a very hard time kind of coming to terms with the fact that Sabine is studying to be a Jedi. I
Mhm.
feel like that was her coping mechanism for losing Ezra and Kanan is to train in the Force because Kanan did train her to use the dark saber. So I feel like she was using that as like a bouncing off point to kind of cope with the fact that she also lost Ezra. Um I believe that, like Ahsoka said, that the Force is in everyone and everybody's able to channel it in their own different ways. However, do I feel that Sabine is going to become like completely force sensitive? And I mean, even in the first episode or second episode, I believe they're like, well, you're not exactly the prime candidate to be
Right.
a Jedi. I was like, well, ouch, first and foremost. But I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, there's only ever been one Mandalorian Jedi, and the
Right.
dark saber was his weapon of choice. But I think giving her force abilities, I feel like would just be kind of destroying a lot of not destroying, that's a terrible choice of word, just kind of downplaying her character, I guess, a little
Mhm.
bit to something where, oh, she's gonna be a Jedi. Or, I mean, if anybody should show any type of force sensitivity or training or anything, it should be Jason, which he
Right.
already proved
Yes.
already. And I'm sitting here being like, yes, that makes sense. Hello, his dad. But for Sabine, I'm super on the fence about it. I love her as a character because first met Sabine, I loved her because she wasn't a Jedi, because she was a Mandalorian and an artist and out there doing all these different things. So I feel like it's kind of looping her into a category that I really don't want to see her be in. But if it happens, I mean, more power to her. Great. You found the Force is with you. I'm
Yeah.
one with the Force is with me type situation. So great. But I don't know. It's kind of I've been really on the fence since really on the fence.
No, I think you and I are on the same page about that. But I think those are all the big things that I noted and wanted to chat with you about. But what about you? Did you have anything that stuck out to you, stuff that worked or didn't work for you, or maybe details that you noticed that you wanted to point out?
There's one detail about his general that I was thinking about this morning, which I thought was really interesting. So, my theory about his general is that he found one of the locals and convinced this local to join him in his quest to, take back and go back to where he came from. And that rose him up through the ranks to become a general. However, because he was working so closely with the Night Mothers, I'm full on believing that this is just some deep Japanese lore type situation
Uh-huh.
here, where samurai in Japan would wear those styles of mask where it would cover their face entirely.
Right.
And the whole premise behind that is that it was to protect them from evil spirits while in the field of combat. And for here, I would view it almost as a cultural thing for this individual who probably is not of Night Sister or brother descent.
Right.
And being around them is probably terrifying because they're not, nice looking people. So I feel like he would have that element to his stormtrooper mask because it would be warding off their evil from
Mm.
him. And it's such a deep Japanese lore thing, but I think that would be such a cool element and just a really cool story point because there are other life forms on this planet besides the Night Sisters and the Night Brothers.
Right.
So that's why I'm kind of sitting here going, Dave, what you doing
That's
there, Dave?
interesting. Yeah, almost kind of like to put it in like American pop culture terms, kind of like Magneto's helmet
Yeah.
protecting him from Professor X, right? Like
Yeah. Same basic
that's
principle.
a pretty good theory. I like that a lot.
And also a big shout out. One of the biggest things I've noticed throughout this entire thing is just costume work. So
Yeah,
allow me to nerd out for a moment.
sure.
Um, the scavengers that attack Sabine and down to just the rebuilds of the stormtrooper armor have such incredible callbacks to the samurai and ronin armor that they would wear in Japan. And I know
Yeah,
that Star Wars is very heavily Japanese influence, like I said earlier, Kurosawa vibes, Seven Samurai, you name it, they'll pull from it type situations here. But the just the really intricate details of those pieces of armor just chef's kiss, whoever came up with those concepts, really more power to you. I was all about it. It was so great. I loved those mercenaries armor so much,
yeah,
especially the really unique helmets and things like that. It was just so good. So
yeah.
good.
Imagine that's Shauna Tripsick,
Yeah.
who is the costume designer. I've gotten a chance to meet her a couple times in the last few months, and she's just so cool and friendly, and obviously super talented. So, great
I love
job
your work.
there. Yeah, she's awesome. And then let's see, Oshi in the comments said the Night Mothers repaired his uniform with the threads of fate. And then a little smiley
Smiley
of
face. I see
some
you
kind.
being sassy.
So that's episode 6, but and I did say this was my favorite so far, but obviously definitely keeping a big open mind for what's coming next. We've got 2 episodes left in this season. Caitlin, now this was last few weeks I kept saying like please have Thrawn show up in the next episode. So I finally got that. I don't know, I'm pretty satisfied. Like everything else is pretty exciting to me. I love the direction all this stuff is going in. Obviously, there's going to be a big conflict between, Ahsoka has arrived. There's going to be a battle of some sort. We've got that emotional moment coming up, I'm sure, between Ezra and Sabine when he finds out what she did. But what else are you hoping for, looking forward to, expecting from these final 2 episodes?
Definitely Ezra's going to be swiping Sabine's lightsaber to do some fighting because I do not believe he has his saber anymore.
Right.
I think actually that was his base saber.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to the conflict between Ezra and Sabine, because I want to see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Just between these two actors, I really want to see how much of like a twist the knife betrayal there's going to be here. I don't want it to be completely written off. Ahsoka, if she faces off against the Night Sisters, I'm gonna like blow a gasket. I think that would be a really cool fight for that to happen. I really want to see. This is just in my little corner of like maybe a happy ending at the last episode. But if they actually get home,
Yeah.
the one thing I would love to see in the last episode, maybe in like the last couple of minutes, is if Ezra ends up training Jason,
Oh,
or getting to even just meet Jason,
yeah.
because I think that will also be a really nice shout out to the Rebels fans of being like, oh, there's the knife. We're gonna just twist it a little more. Thanks, I love it. I hate it at the same time. And I mean, this is never gonna happen. I mean, he said he was done with doing anything Star Wars, but just a little hint of Kanan somewhere. Star Wars people, if you're hearing me, Dave, please. Just a little bit of like a Force Ghost moment of Kanan, or just even another mention of him. I'll take another name drop. I don't care.
Right.
But there's just so much that could happen, and there's only 2 episodes left where I'm sitting here going, anything could happen. And I know that Ahsoka's gonna. If Ahsoka and Ezra team up against Thrawn, I want to see it. I'm here for it. Let's do it. Like, whew.
And also, where's Zeb? Like, we got Zeb in The Mandalorian, right? Yeah.
Very briefly. And I'm sitting here going, Zeb, you're back home with Callus? Like, what's going on here, buddy?
Right. I guess that's the other thing I would like to see is the remainder of the Ghost crew reunited before this season wraps up. But yeah, super, super excited for these next 2 weeks. I think I'm sure they'll be great no matter what. Very excited to see what happens. And that's going to bring us to the end of our Ahsoka discussion for this week. But we still have the final segment here on Who's the Bossk. It's called First Steps into a Larger World. And this is where we talk about the media that we've been consuming and or enjoying outside of Star Wars. I saw a movie from a Star Wars director named Gareth Edwards. He directed Rogue One, a Star Wars story. He has a new movie, his first movie since then. It's called The Creator. It's a science fiction war movie. I thought it was really, really good. Amazing visual effects from Industrial Light and Magic. And it's very timely in that it is about AI. And it's got little element. You've seen this kind of movie before. It's like the robots versus the humans and that kind of thing. But I think it is very fresh and original in the way that it approaches this subject matter. I would definitely recommend this movie if you're into sci-fi. Great actors, great cast, great direction. The visuals are just incredible. So that's The Creator. It comes out, I think, at the end of next week. What about you, Caitlin? Have you read or watched or played anything lately that you'd like to talk about?
So, couple of things. I just recently, a couple of days ago, saw the movie Elemental by Pixar.
Oh, great.
It was their latest animated film. And I'm going to just say that the advertisements for this film did this movie dirty. It is probably top 3 Pixar film for me of all time. The story, the animation was just so realistic in some points, but it still like worked with these like characters made of fire and water, and the story will just like melt your heart. I mean, if you love Disney and Pixar, especially Pixar, like this is like classic Pixar. It had like a wonderful romance to it. It was just really so well done. 10 out of 10, would highly recommend. I actually just did another rewatch of the live action One Piece on Netflix.
Okay.
And I've watched a couple of episodes of the anime, but this live action adaptation of One Piece is by far not one of the best live action anime adaptation that has ever been made. It's just dripping with love for the actual source material. And the director is a fan. All of the people who play the main characters, like the main crew, are fans of the series. And you can really tell that a lot of love went into this. And I know that the original creator of the series was very actively involved with the creation. And it shows across the board with costume design, makeup, special effects. I mean, the one guy who plays Sanji, he went in and learned how to cook like on professional levels of being a chef, and then trained to be able to actually do his fighting style, where he
Wow.
doesn't use his hands when he fights; he only uses his feet, really. So he trained himself to do that as well as the character, and it's just incredible. And then the last thing I've really been consuming is Critical Role, which is the Dungeons and Dragons streaming on Netflix with Matt Mercer and all the voice actors who get together and play Dungeons and Dragons once a week. I'm a couple of episodes behind. I'm catching up right now. But definitely, if you're into D&D and don't mind really, really long episodes or something,
Right.
definitely worth a watch. Also, yeah, I mean, like it's just great. Those are like my three main things that I've been doing. Besides, I haven't really. I have to pick up a book. I have a couple of books like in a stack that I'm trying to
Oh,
catch up
that's
on.
very familiar to me. Speaking of D&D, I've been really immersed in Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know if you've played that yet, but
I
that's
really want to
this
like.
really in-depth role-playing game. I have it on PlayStation, and it's
Um,
super good.
the
Yeah.
last game I played was Honkai Star Rail,
Okay.
which is a free to download. It's from the same studio that did Genshin Impact. It's more of a turn-based RPG
Hmm.
versus the open world battle like in
Right.
Genshin, which is more my speed. I like turn-based RPGs a little bit more than like full action RPGs.
Me too. My
Um,
my brain is very slow, so it's like, let me take my time deciding what I want to do next.
I need to breathe. Give me a
Yeah.
moment to think about strategy. And then
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, and then, I think the next thing is I'm gonna do a replay of because it's going into spooky season, it's officially going to be spooky season now.
Yeah.
It was a spooky season after Labor Day, in my opinion. But I'm gonna go back and do a replay of one of my favorite game series of all time. I think I'm gonna go back and do BioShock.
Oh,
Really
nice. Yeah.
love
BioShock, was it Infinite? That's all in the like sky.
Yes.
Oh, that was so good. Yeah, I love BioShock too.
Yeah, I got to
Um,
meet the, creator, Ken Levine. I got to meet him and his development team a couple of times at, PAX East. So,
nice.
really, really great people, and those are some of my favorite games, BioShock.
Sweet. Yeah, definitely recommend those as well. And that is going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of Who's the Boss. Big, big thank you to my guest, Caitlin Beards. Caitlin, do you want people to find you? And if so, where can they find you?
You guys can come find me. It's totally fine. So, I mainly use Instagram. I go by Lady Ava Designs,
Okay.
AVA on Instagram, and on the app formerly known as Twitter, I go by just Lady_Ava. And that Lady Ava Designs is mainly my main one across all social media now.
Fantastic. And thanks again for coming and chatting with me
Thank
about
you.
Star Wars. That was a fantastic chat. I have you back on the show at some point in the future if you're up for it.
Of course, I'd love to come back and talk Star Wars. Don't mind if I guess.
Terrific. Next week on actually the next episode, not a full week from now, just a few days, I'll be releasing episode 170, which is a Mike and David movie club episode. We'll be talking about the seventh voyage of Sinbad, which is Ray Harryhausen stop motion animated monster movie. Really entertaining. We've already recorded it. It's coming out, I think, Monday, this episode. And then after that, we'll be talking about Ahsoka episode 7 at the end of next week. As always, please visit laughingplace.com for all your Disney news and opinions. I am on Instagram at Who's the Bossk Pod. My name is Mike Celestino. Thank you out there for listening and or watching here on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.